I knew the evening was over the moment my granddaughter laughed at my shoes, not loudly, just enough for everyone to hear, the way young people do when they want permission to be cruel. I was 72 that spring, not frail, not confused, not asking for anyone's patience. I arrived on time, hair brushed, back straight, carrying a small tin of almond cookies I had baked that afternoon because old habits die slowly. I wore a gray wool skirt, a soft cardigan, and low black shoes that had carried me through church aisles, hospital corridors, and one long funeral. Clean, proper, mine. The dinner was at my daughter Elaine's house. New place, open kitchen, everything white and glass, like no one planned to live there for long. My granddaughter, Chloe, sat at the island scrolling her phone, legs crossed, expensive sneakers dangling. She looked up once, her eyes flicking over me the way clerks scan barcodes. "Wow," she said, smiling at her cousin. "Grandma dressed like it's 1985 again." It was said lightly, playfully. That's what made it worse. Someone snorted. Someone else cleared their throat. Elaine kept pouring wine, her back to me. No one said a word. Not one. I felt the room tilt, just a little. Not from shock, from clarity. I took off my coat slowly and hung it on the chair, the way I always had. My hands did not shake. I sat down. I unfolded my napkin. I waited for someone, anyone, to say, "Chloe, that's not kind." No one did. Dinner went on. Talk of internships, rent prices, trips abroad. Chloe leaned toward her mother and whispered something, then glanced at my cardigan and smiled again, amused, as if I were a prop from a thrift store display. I chewed my food carefully. I tasted nothing. I thought of the account statements folded in my desk drawer at home. The education fund I had set up the year Chloe was born. The one I added to every year instead of taking vacations, instead of replacing furniture, instead of buying anything that didn't last. I thought of signing papers, of meetings with polite men who called me Mrs. Caldwell and explained compound interest as if I hadn't built my life on careful numbers. After dessert, Chloe stood, stretched, and said, "No offense, Grandma, but you should really let Mom take you shopping sometime. People judge, you know." People, not her. People. I smiled at her then. A small, calm smile that surprised even me. I picked up my purse, thanked Elaine for dinner, and kissed her cheek. She smelled like expensive perfume and distraction. Outside, the night air was cool. I sat in my car for a long moment before starting the engine. I did not cry. I did not feel angry. I felt finished. By the time I drove home, I already knew exactly what I would do the next morning. If you enjoy the stories here, dear, you're welcome to join our Patreon. There you'll find exclusive tales that never appear on YouTube, and new stories come out earlier than anywhere else. The link is just below. We're waiting for you. I slept poorly that night, not because I was upset, but because my mind would not stop arranging things. Old minds do that. We sort, we review, we put memories back in their proper drawers. In the dark, I kept seeing Chloe's smile. Not sharp, not openly hostile. Worse than that, careless. The kind you give furniture you plan to replace. In the morning, I woke before the alarm. My knees ached as usual. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that comes only when no one expects anything from you. I made tea and sat at the kitchen table, watching steam rise from the cup. The cardigan from last night lay folded over the chair. I touched the sleeve. The wool was still soft. People think moments like that break you. They don't. They clarify. I remembered Chloe at 6, missing her front teeth, climbing onto my lap with sticky hands. At 12, crying over a math test at my kitchen table while I cut apples and told her she was smarter than she believed. At 17, asking me, not her parents, if college was really worth it. I told her yes. I told her education was freedom no one could take away. I believed that. What I hadn't understood was that generosity, when unacknowledged, turns into expectation. And expectation, when fed long enough, grows teeth. I went upstairs and opened the desk drawer. Everything was where I kept it. Neat folders, labels in my handwriting. The college fund documents sat on top because I used them most often. Quarterly statements, projections, notes from meetings. I read them slowly, though I already knew every number. The fund was in my name. Always had been. I'd insisted on that years ago when Elaine suggested putting Chloe's name on it to make it feel more real. I'd smiled then, too, and said no. Some instincts don't fade with age. I closed the folder and rested my hands on it. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something close to sadness. Not for the money, for the story I had told myself about what it meant. I was not taking something away. I was stopping something that no longer existed. Gratitude. The phone rang mid-morning. Elaine. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," she said, too brightly. "Did you get home okay last night?" "Yes." A pause. She waited. I did not fill the silence for her. "Chloe didn't mean anything by her comment," Elaine said finally. "You know how she is. Young. Honest. Honest." I looked at the window, at my small backyard, at the bird feeder I refilled every morning. "I know exactly how she is," I replied. Another pause. Shorter this time. "Well," Elaine said, forcing a laugh, "she loves you." I thought of the word love as Chloe used it. Casually, like a jacket you borrow and forget to return. "I have things to do today," I said. "We'll talk another time." I hung up before she could respond. My hand was steady. By noon, I had my coat on and my purse in my hand. The folder sat inside, heavier than paper should feel. I locked the door behind me and walked to the car. At my age, people expect hesitation. They expect trembling resolve, second-guessing, a call for reassurance. I gave them none. The bank was quiet when I arrived. Polite smiles, familiar faces. I had been coming here longer than some of them had been alive. I sat down when asked, placed the folder on the desk, and said calmly, "I'd like to make a change." The young man nodded, already reaching for a pen. I watched him closely. This was not anger. This was accuracy. The banker's office smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and printer ink. I had been in that room many times before, usually to nod, listen, sign where indicated. Today felt different, not dramatic, just deliberate, like choosing the right knife from a drawer. The young man introduced himself. Daniel. Early 30s, maybe. Polite. He spoke clearly, the way people do when they are trained to respect age without quite knowing what it has survived. "What kind of change were you considering, Mrs. Caldwell?" he asked. I opened the folder myself. I did not slide it toward him. That mattered. Inside were the documents I had once thought of as a promise. Now I saw them as what they really were. Control. "I want to revoke my standing instruction to maintain this education fund," I said, effective immediately. He blinked once, just once. "I see," he said carefully. "May I ask why?" "No." That surprised him, I could tell. People my age are expected to explain ourselves, to soften decisions with stories. I did neither. He nodded and turned his screen slightly away from me, fingers moving. "The account is solely in your name," he said. "There are no penalties for withdrawal or reassignment." "You're well within your rights." "I know." Silence settled between us, not uncomfortable, just clean. I watched his hands, young hands, no spots, no tremor. Someday, if he was lucky, he would understand this moment from the other side of the desk. "I'd like the funds transferred," I said, "into my primary account, and I want all future automatic contributions canceled." "Of course." He printed the forms and slid them across. I read each line. Slowly. My eyes were still good, my mind better. I signed where required, my name steady, the same signature I'd used for decades. Not smaller, not weaker. As I handed the papers back, a strange thought crossed my mind. Chloe would never know the exact moment this happened. There would be no announcement, no confrontation, no raised voices. Just an absence discovered later, like a missing stair you only notice when you fall. Daniel looked up. "Would you like to leave the account open, just inactive, in case you reconsider?" "No," I said. "Close it." Another blink. He complied. When I stood to leave, he said, "Mrs. Caldwell?" "Yes." "I hope you don't mind me saying so, but you seem very sure." I smiled then, not for him, for myself. "That comes with time," I said, "if you're paying attention." Outside, the afternoon had warmed. I sat in my car again, hands on the wheel, breathing in the familiar smell of old leather and peppermint candies. I felt lighter, not relieved, aligned. The phone rang before I reached home. Elaine, again. I let it go to voicemail. At home, I changed into my house dress and made soup. The ordinary rhythm of it grounded me. Chop, stir, taste. I ate alone at the table, the radio murmuring softly. I thought of all the times I had sat across from Chloe, paying for meals, books, fees, smiling at her confidence as if it were harmless. In the evening, a message came through. "Mom," Elaine wrote, "we need to talk. Chloe is very upset about something the school said today." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I turned the phone face down and went to wash my bowl. That night, I slept deeply. No sorting, no rehearsing. Just rest. In the morning, I stood in front of my closet deciding what to wear. I chose the same gray skirt and cardigan from the dinner. The shoes, too. I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. "People judge," Chloe had said. Let them. People assume that money comes into an old woman's life the way dust does. Slowly, accidentally, without intention. That was never true for me. I earned every dollar long before anyone called me Grandma. I was 23 when I took my first bookkeeping job, newly married, hair always pinned back, shoes already sensible. My husband died young. 49. A stroke that came without warning and left me standing in a hospital hallway with a purse full of receipts and no idea how to go on. I went on anyway. You always do. I worked. I saved. I learned which promises mattered and which didn't. I learned how to say no to things I wanted so I could say yes to things that would last. By the time Elaine had Chloe, I was already careful in ways younger women mistake for coldness. It wasn't coldness. It was foresight. When Chloe was born, I opened the fund quietly. No balloons, no speeches, just a meeting with a financial advisor who spoke too fast and assumed too little. I corrected him. He smiled after that. The account was mine. I paid taxes on it. I monitored it. I added to it every year, sometimes more when times were good, sometimes less when they weren't. But I never stopped. Elaine knew, of course. She thanked me in the beginning. Then she stopped mentioning it altogether, as if gratitude were something you grow out of, like childhood shoes. Chloe grew up knowing college was covered. That word did damage I didn't see at the time. Covered meant guaranteed. Covered meant untouchable. Covered meant I became invisible. My contribution folded into the background like furniture you assume will always be there. When Chloe was 16, she once complained that her friend's grandmother drove a nicer car. I laughed it off. When she was 18, she joked that I dressed like a library. I smiled then, too. I told myself young people needed time. I told myself respect would come later. It didn't. What came instead was entitlement dressed up as confidence. Eye rolls, correcting my words in public, speaking over me. Elaine would squeeze my arm and say, "You know how she is." As if that explained anything, as if it excused everything. The night at dinner wasn't the first cut. It was the last one I allowed. That morning at the bank, when I signed those papers, I wasn't erasing Chloe's future. I was correcting my past mistake, the belief that love required endless tolerance. Money is not love. It is effort, time, sacrifice, and respect is the minimum payment due. That afternoon, I reorganized my desk. Old habits again. I placed the closed account documents in a new folder, thinner than the old one. It felt right. I made notes for myself, not explanations. Boundaries. The phone rang once more before evening. Chloe, this time. I watched it ring. I imagined her face when she learned the truth, the confusion turning into outrage, the certainty cracking. I did not answer. I watered my plants instead. The ones by the window that had survived years of uneven light because I paid attention to what they needed, not what looked impressive. That night, I sat with a book and a cup of tea. No noise, no guilt. Just the quiet knowledge that dignity, once reclaimed, does not need defending. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like myself again. The next day unfolded more slowly than the one before, as if time itself had decided to watch what I would do now that I had stopped rushing to please. I woke early, as always. My body kept its own schedule, independent of emotions. I dressed, made tea, opened the curtains. Outside, the street looked unchanged. Cars passed. A woman walked her dog. The world had not noticed my decision, and that pleased me. The phone, however, had noticed. 3 missed calls, 2 from Elaine, 1 from Chloe. No messages yet. They were waiting for me to panic, to rush toward the noise and ask what was wrong. I did neither. I buttered my toast carefully and ate standing by the counter, crumbs falling onto the plate without urgency. At 10, the message finally came. "Grandma," Chloe wrote. "There's a problem with my tuition. Call me ASAP." ASAP. Young people love that word. It suggests emergency, authority, importance. I read the message twice, then set the phone down beside the sink and washed my cup. When I finished, I dried my hands and sat at the table before replying. "What kind of problem?" I typed. The response came almost immediately. "They say the next semester isn't funded. This makes no sense." Mom said the money was there. I imagined her now, sitting somewhere bright and modern, heart racing not from fear, but from interruption. Plans disturbed, certainty challenged. I did not enjoy that image, but I did not turn away from it either. "We'll talk later," I wrote. "I'm busy this morning." Busy. Another word that unsettles people who are used to access. Elaine called 10 minutes later. I answered this time. "Mom, what did you do?" she asked, skipping greeting and restraint. "I made a decision. You can't just—" She stopped herself, lowered her voice. "Chloe is in tears. This affects her future. So did her words, I replied. There was a sharp inhale on the other end. She's young. She didn't mean it like that. Elaine had said the same thing for years. I had let it work on me every time. Meaning is not required, I said. Impact is enough. Silence stretched. I heard movement, muffled voices. Chloe was likely nearby, listening. Learning, perhaps for the first time, that not everything could be smoothed over. You're punishing her, Elaine said finally. No, I said calmly. I'm correcting myself. I did not raise my voice. I did not list past slights. I did not remind her of sacrifices. I had learned something important. Explanations invite negotiations. I was done negotiating my worth. Elaine softened then. I could hear it. What would it take to fix this? Fix, as if something were broken, as if respect could be patched with urgency. It's already fixed, I said, just not in the way you hoped. I ended the call gently before she could ask for compromises or suggest apologies on Chloe's behalf. Apologies offered under pressure have a hollow sound. I had no interest in collecting them. Around noon, I went out for groceries. Nothing special. Soup, vegetables, apples, bread. The cashier smiled and asked if I needed help with my bags. I thanked her and declined. Small exchanges like that matter. They remind you that courtesy is not a performance, it's a choice. When I returned home, there was a long message waiting from Chloe. Angry this time, accusatory, words like unfair, controlling, overreaction. She mentioned everything except what she had said at dinner. I read it once, then again. Slowly, I noticed what was missing. I did not reply. Instead, I went to my desk and opened a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote one sentence in careful, steady handwriting. I do not fund disrespect. I closed the notebook and placed it in the drawer. That evening, as the sun lowered and the house filled with long shadows, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not triumph, not relief. Peace. Not because they understood. They didn't. But because, at last, I did. By the 6th day, the tone changed. The anger burned off first. That always happens. What follows is panic, then calculation. Elaine came by unannounced that afternoon. I knew it was her before I opened the door. The sharp knock, too fast, too certain. She stood on the porch with her arms crossed, phone already in her hand, as if she might need proof of something mid-conversation. You didn't answer my messages, she said. I read them. That's not the same thing. No, I agreed. It isn't. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, glancing around the house as though she hadn't grown up in it. Her eyes moved quickly, cataloging. The way she used to look when she was deciding what to keep and what to throw away. Chloe wasn't with her. That told me more than any words. Elaine sat down at the kitchen table, placed her phone screen up, and folded her hands. This was the posture she used when she wanted to appear reasonable. Mom, she said, softer now, we need to talk like adults. I poured myself tea before sitting down, took my time with it, steam first, then the cup, then the chair. We are adults, I said. You just don't like the outcome. She exhaled sharply. Chloe could lose her place. Do you understand that? I understand consequences very well. You're acting like she committed a crime. No, I said. I'm acting like she showed me who she is. Elaine leaned forward. She apologized. I looked at her. When? Elaine hesitated. Just a fraction. Long enough. She said she didn't mean to hurt you. That's not an apology, I replied. That's a wish. Elaine pressed her lips together. I saw irritation flicker through the concern, like something familiar returning to its place. So what now? She asked. Are you just going to sit back and watch her struggle? I met her eyes. I've been watching you struggle with honesty for years. That landed harder than I expected. She looked away. We sat in silence for a moment. The clock on the wall ticked. Old clock. Still accurate. I kept it because it worked, not because it was pretty. She's your granddaughter, Elaine said finally. Family helps family. Yes, I said. When there is respect. Elaine shook her head. You're making this about clothes, about one stupid comment. I leaned back in my chair. No, I'm making this about a pattern you chose not to interrupt. Her eyes snapped back to me. So you're punishing me too now? I'm stopping, I said. That's all. She stood abruptly. Do you know how this makes you look? I almost smiled. There it was. At my age, I said evenly, being misunderstood is cheaper than being used. She stared at me as if seeing someone else entirely. Maybe she was. At the door, she paused. Chloe said you've always been controlling. I nodded once. That's what people call boundaries when they bump into them. After she left, the house felt larger, quieter. I washed the cups, dried them, put them away. I noticed how steady my hands were, how calm my breathing felt. That evening, an email arrived from the college financial office. Polite, neutral, informational, options listed. Deadline stated. No emotion. Institutions don't have them. I forwarded it to Elaine without comment. An hour later, Chloe texted again. Shorter this time. I didn't think you were like this. I read it carefully. Neither did I typed back. That was all. I turned the phone off after that. Later, as I lay in bed, I thought about how strange it was. That for decades I had been afraid of losing them, and now that I'd stopped paying for their approval, what I felt wasn't loss at all. It was space. And space, I was learning, is where dignity finally has room to breathe. The seventh day was quieter on the surface, but it carried weight. By then, the noise had exhausted itself. No more shouting messages, no sudden visits, just distance settling into place like dust after furniture is moved. I spent the morning sorting papers I had ignored for years, old warranties, instruction manuals, letters that no longer needed answers. I worked slowly, not because I had to, but because I could. Age teaches you that slowness is not weakness. It is choice. Near noon, I found the envelope. Cream-colored. Thick paper. The kind you don't throw away by accident. Inside was the original confirmation of the college fund, dated years back, my signature firm and unmistakable. I ran my finger over it once, not sentimentally, just acknowledging what had been done and undone. I put it in the shredder. The sound was brief, final, strangely satisfying. The phone rang shortly after. Not Elaine, not Chloe. A number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Caldwell? A young woman asked. This is Karen from the college bursar's office. I just wanted to confirm you received our updated documentation. Yes, I said. Thank you. There was a pause. If you have any questions about reinstating, I don't. Another pause. Longer this time. Understood. We'll update our records accordingly. When the call ended, I stood by the window for a moment, watching a man across the street wash his car with unnecessary care. The world moved on. Always does. In the afternoon, I went through my closet. Not to purge, not to impress, to reclaim. Clothes hold memory. People forget that. I touched fabrics, remembered where I had worn them, who I had been with, what I had endured while wearing each piece. Nothing there embarrassed me. That realization surprised me more than anything else. I tried on the cardigan again, looked at myself in the mirror. "This is who I am," I said out loud. It sounded steady. That evening, Elaine sent one last message. Long, carefully worded, full of concern, disappointment, appeals to family unity. She mentioned how Chloe was rethinking things, how stress was affecting her health, how this decision could change everything. She was right, but not in the way she meant. I typed my reply slowly. "Elaine, I did not raise you to excuse cruelty, and I did not live this long to finance it. I am not angry. I am done. Please respect that." I sent it and felt no urge to elaborate. An hour later, Chloe wrote again. "I guess I didn't realize you could actually say no." I stared at the message longer than I had the others. "Neither did you," I finally replied. "Now you do." That was the end of it for that day. Before bed, I opened my notebook again. On the next page, I wrote another line. "Respect begins where access ends." I closed it gently, as if not to disturb the thought. Lying in the dark, I considered the irony of it all. For years, I had worried about becoming irrelevant, invisible, too old to matter. Turns out I had never been irrelevant. I had just been too available. And with one signature, calm, legal, irreversible, I had reminded them and myself that dignity does not retire with age. By the 8th day, the silence had grown deliberate. It wasn't the awkward silence of people who don't know what to say. It was the careful silence of people waiting for someone else to blink. I had learned over the years that silence can be louder than arguments. It leaves room for fear to echo. That morning, I received a letter. An actual letter, not an email or a message typed in haste. Elaine's handwriting on the envelope. Tight, slightly slanted. The same as when she was a teenager trying to appear older than she felt. I did not open it right away. I made breakfast first. Eggs, toast, jam I'd made myself the previous summer. I sat at the table and ate slowly, listening to the radio talk about weather I wouldn't plan around anymore. Only after I finished did I take the envelope and slide my finger under the flap. Elaine's words were measured. Careful. She wrote about misunderstanding, about generational gaps, about stress and pride. She wrote that Chloe was learning and that perhaps I could help guide her instead of withdrawing support. She ended by saying she hoped I remembered how much family meant to me. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. I noticed she hadn't once mentioned the comment at dinner, not the laugh, not the shoes, not the silence that followed. That omission mattered. In the afternoon, my neighbor stopped by, Ruth. 78, widowed longer than I'd known her, sharp as a tack. She brought over tomatoes from her garden and stood in my kitchen while I found a bowl. "You look lighter," she said, squinting at me. "I feel quieter," I replied. She nodded as if those things were related. Same difference. We drank tea. We talked about nothing important. When she left, she squeezed my hand and said, "Whatever you did, don't undo it too fast." Wise woman. Later that day, the phone rang again. This time, Chloe's name appeared with a small note beneath it. Repeated calls. I let it ring twice, then 3 times. Then I answered. "Grandma," she said, her voice thinner than before, "I need to understand what's happening." I sat down before replying. "Then listen." There was a pause. I could hear her breathing. You laughed at me, I said, in front of everyone. You reduced me to an embarrassment and expected me to absorb it quietly, the way I always have. I didn't mean, I know, I interrupted. You've said that. Meaning is not the issue. She was silent now. For years, I continued, I showed you love the way I know how, with consistency, with sacrifice, with money I earned and set aside carefully. You accepted it as background noise. That's not fair, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Fairness, I replied, is not automatic. It's earned in how you treat people who don't owe you anything. She swallowed audibly. So, what am I supposed to do now? That question was honest. Finally. That, I said, is not my problem to solve. She exhaled shakily. You're really okay with this? With stepping back? I'm not stepping back, I said. I'm standing where I should have stood a long time ago. When the call ended, I remained seated for a long while. My hands rested in my lap. They felt old, capable, mine. That evening, I took out my will and read it again. No urgency, no fear, just review. I made notes in the margins. Small adjustments. Thoughtful ones. I wasn't erasing anyone. I was rebalancing. Before bed, I stood at the mirror and studied my face. The lines were deeper than they used to be. But there was something new there. Not hardness, not bitterness. Clarity. People think clarity comes early in life. It doesn't. It comes when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who were never really listening. I turned off the light and lay down without checking my phone. For the first time in days, I knew they understood one thing at least. I was not bluffing. The 9th day brought consequences that no one could soften with tone or timing. It began with a knock, not sharp like Elaine's, but hesitant. I knew before opening the door that it would be Chloe. Young people knock differently when they are no longer certain of their position. She stood on the porch with her arms wrapped around herself, hair pulled back carelessly, eyes tired. No smile, no phone in hand this time. Just her. I didn't know if you'd let me in, she said. I didn't know either, I replied, and stepped aside. She walked into the house slowly, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. The framed photos, the old lamp, the rug she'd spilled juice on years ago and never apologized for. She sat where I indicated, on the same chair Elaine had used days earlier. Funny how places remember. I spoke to the financial office again, she said. They explained everything. I nodded. They're thorough. She winced slightly. They said it's final. Yes. Silence filled the space between us, not hostile, just exposed. I didn't think you'd actually do it, she admitted. There it was, the truth, at last. I know, I said. She looked up, startled. You do? Of course. You didn't think I could. That's why you laughed. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked down at her hands. I wasn't trying to hurt you, she said quietly. Everyone jokes. I didn't think it mattered. It mattered, I replied, because it showed me how safe you felt being careless with me. She swallowed. Mom says you're being extreme. I smiled faintly. Your mother has always called clarity extreme when it inconvenienced her. Chloe shifted in her seat. So, is there any way to fix this? I leaned back, studying her. Not cruelly, honestly. There is a way forward, I said, but it doesn't involve me reopening anything. Her eyes widened. You mean it's gone for good? Yes. Tears gathered then. Real ones this time. Not dramatic. Frustrated. Afraid. I don't know how I'll manage, she whispered. I watched her carefully. This was the moment people mistake for victory. It wasn't that. You will manage the way adults do, I said, with loans, with work, with responsibility. She shook her head. That's not fair. Other kids are not my responsibility, I interrupted gently, and neither are their grandparents. She looked at me then, really looked, as if trying to reconcile the woman in front of her with the version she'd filed away as permanent support. You're different, she said. No, I replied. I'm the same. You're just seeing me without the discount. That landed. I could tell. She wiped her face. I didn't respect you. No, I agreed. You didn't. I didn't even think about it, she added. That's worse, I said, without cruelty. We sat there for a long time. The clock ticked. The house breathed. I'm sorry, she said eventually. Not loud, not polished, just there. I accepted the words for what they were. Late, incomplete, but finally hers. I hear you, I said. But apologies don't undo patterns. They interrupt them. What comes next is up to you. She nodded slowly. Mom says you'll change your mind. I met her gaze. Your mother is wrong. That seemed to settle something in her. She stood, unsure what to do next. I guess I should go, she said. Yes. At the door, she paused. Do you still want me in your life? I answered without hesitation. I want people in my life who know the cost of being there. She absorbed that, then nodded and left. When the door closed, I did not feel empty. I felt clean. That night, Elaine texted once more. A single line. She came home crying. I typed back just as briefly. So did I once. I learned. I turned the phone off and sat by the window, watching the streetlights come on one by one. Some lessons arrive late, but they arrive exactly when they must. The 10th day did not bring drama. It brought rearrangement. I woke with the quiet sense that something had shifted permanently, the way you feel after furniture has been moved in the dark and your body learns the new paths before your eyes do. Nothing hurt. Nothing felt missing. What I felt was firmness, like ground after water drains away. Elaine called late morning. I answered, not out of obligation, but because avoidance no longer served a purpose. Mom, she said, tired now, stripped of angles. We need to talk. We are talking, I replied. There was a pause, then a sigh. Chloe barely slept. She's looking into loans, part-time work. She's scared. I nodded to myself, though she couldn't see it. Good. Fear is honest. That's a terrible thing to say. No, I said calmly. It's a useful thing to admit. Elaine's voice tightened. Do you hear yourself? You sound cold? I sound finished explaining, I answered. She fell silent. I imagined her sitting somewhere familiar, phone pressed to her ear, trying to locate the mother she used to negotiate with. You've changed, she said finally. I smiled faintly. I've stopped pretending. She tried another angle then. I'd expected it. What if Chloe apologizes properly, in person? What if she shows you she's learned something? That would be good for her, I said. It won't reopen the account. Elaine's frustration surfaced again. So this is permanent? Yes. And what if something happens to you? She asked. What if you need help someday? I leaned back in my chair, letting that question sit between us. If I need help, I said slowly, I will ask people who don't measure their kindness by what they expect in return. She exhaled sharply. That's unfair. No, I replied. That's accurate. We ended the call without resolution. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to smooth things over afterward. Some bridges are meant to hold weight. Others reveal themselves as decoration. In the afternoon, I walked through my house with a notepad. I made small decisions. What I used, what I didn't, what stayed, what went. Age pairs you down if you let it. Not into less, but into clearer. I donated a box of clothes. Not the cardigan. Never that. I reorganized shelves. I moved a chair closer to the window. Light matters more than people think. In the evening, I received an email from Chloe. Short. Careful. I got a job interview next week. I don't know if I should tell you, but I am. I read it twice. I'm glad, I replied. That's a start. No hearts, no softness, no punishment either. Just truth. Later, as dusk settled, I sat with my notebook again. I flipped back through the pages. 2 sentences so far. They looked solid. Earned. I added a third. Love without respect becomes obligation. I closed the book and rested my hand on it, feeling the weight of paper and intention beneath my palm. People talk about forgiveness as if it is a gift you give others. They are wrong. Forgiveness is a release, and I had already let go of what I no longer needed. What remained was choice. I chose peace. I chose clarity. I chose not to confuse endurance with virtue ever again. That night, as I turned off the lamp, I realized something quietly extraordinary. I was no longer waiting for them to understand. I already did. By the 11th day, the pressure stopped coming from the outside and began arriving in quieter forms. Not calls, not messages, invitations. Elaine sent one first. A dinner. Just the 3 of us, she said. Neutral ground. No arguments. A chance to reset. She chose a restaurant I used to like years ago, before it became fashionable and loud. She remembered that much, at least. I did not answer right away. An hour later came another message, longer this time. She wrote about how families fracture when people dig in, about how Chloe was trying, about how I was making things harder than they needed to be. That sentence stayed with me. Harder than they needed to be. I folded laundry while I thought about it. Slow work. Useful work. The kind that gives your hands something to do while your mind decides. What they wanted was not reconciliation. It was relief. They wanted the discomfort to end without changing the behavior that caused it. They wanted the old arrangement with new language. I sent a single reply. I'm not interested in resetting. Only in moving forward, honestly. Elaine did not respond. That afternoon, my sister phoned. Younger than me by 6 years. Still convinced that family is something you hold together with compromise and silence. I heard things are tense, she said carefully. Yes. You know, she continued, in our day, we didn't take everything so personally. I smiled to myself. In our day, we were taught to swallow a lot. She sighed. You're punishing everyone for one mistake. No, I said. I'm ending a pattern everyone benefited from except me. Silence again. Then the familiar line. You don't have that many years left to be estranged. That one stung, only because it was meant to. I have fewer years left to be small, I replied. She changed the subject after that. Later, Chloe sent another message. Longer, less sharp. She wrote about her interview, about budgeting, about how expensive textbooks really were. She did not ask for money. That was new. At the end, she wrote, I think I understand what you meant now. I don't like it, but I understand it. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Understanding does not equal agreement, but it is a beginning. I wrote back, discomfort is part of growing up. So is accountability. That evening, I took a walk, just around the block. The air was cool, the kind that clears your head. I passed houses where lights glowed behind curtains, families moving inside their routines. I felt no envy, only distance. Not lonely, just separate. When I returned home, there was a voicemail waiting. Elaine again. Her voice sounded different this time. Controlled, measured. "If you're not willing to meet," she said, "then we need to talk about what this means long term, about holidays, emergencies, your will." There it was, the last lever. I sat down before calling her back. "You don't need to threaten absence," I said when she answered. "I'm already living with it." "That's not fair," she snapped. "You're the one pulling away." "I'm not pulling away," I said evenly. "I'm refusing to be pulled." She went quiet. "I raised you," I continued. "I love you. But love doesn't require surrender. Not anymore." "So, what do you want?" she asked, tired now. "I want respect without conditions," I said. "If that's impossible, then distance is healthier than pretense." She didn't argue after that. She didn't agree either. We ended the call without promises. That night, I sat at my desk and opened my notebook again. The pages were filling slowly, deliberately. I added another line. "Boundaries are not punishments. They are instructions." I closed the book and placed it back in the drawer. As I turned off the lights, I felt something settle into place. Not triumph, not regret. Acceptance. Not of their behavior, but of my limits. I had done what I could. I had said what needed saying. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel responsible for how others reacted to my self-respect. That realization didn't make me lonely. It made me free. By the 12th day, the dust had settled enough for reality to show its shape. This was the part no one warns you about. Not the confrontation, not the decision, but the aftermath. The slow adjustment when people realize you mean what you said and that nothing is coming to save them from it. Chloe did not call anymore. She sent occasional updates instead. Practical ones. She had gotten the job. Cafe near campus. Early mornings. Tired feet. She wrote about learning how to say no to extra shifts because exhaustion costs more than people admit. She did not complain. She did not ask. That mattered. Elaine went quiet. Not angry, not conciliatory. Distant. She skipped her usual Sunday call. I let the silence stand. I had learned that chasing closure often reopens doors better left closed. I filled my days deliberately. I met with my lawyer and made the changes I had been circling for years. Nothing dramatic, no punishments carved into paper, just clarity. My affairs were simple, tidy, aligned with how I actually lived rather than how others expected me to. I closed accounts I no longer needed. Opened one I did. I redirected monthly contributions, not to people, but to causes that did not confuse kindness with entitlement. A local literacy program, a women's shelter, quiet work, necessary work. The money moved without argument. It always does. One afternoon, Elaine finally came by again. No warning this time, but no force either. She stood in the doorway uncertainly, older than she had looked just weeks before. "I won't stay long," she said. "You never do," I replied, not unkindly. She smiled weakly and stepped inside. We sat across from each other, the space between us filled with things unsaid and no longer urgent. "Chloe's managing," she said after a while. "She's different." "Yes," I said. "Responsibility does that." Elaine nodded. "She doesn't joke the same way anymore." "No," I agreed. "She's learning weight." Elaine looked at me then, really looked. You scared her. I surprised her, I corrected. Fear fades. Lessons don't. She sighed. I still think you could have handled it differently. I could have, I said. But then nothing would have changed. She had no answer for that. Before leaving, she hesitated. You know, people talk. I smiled. They always have. What do you tell them? She asked. The truth, I said, that I stopped paying for disrespect. She left shortly after. No argument, no reconciliation, just reality acknowledged. That night, Chloe sent a message that stayed with me. I don't expect anything from you anymore, but I hope someday you'll be proud of me anyway. I read it twice before answering. Pride doesn't come from comfort, I wrote. It comes from how you carry yourself when no one is cushioning the fall. She replied with a simple, I'm trying. And for the first time since this all began, I believed her. Later, sitting alone with the lights low, I thought about how strange it was that people had assumed my decision was about money when it had never been about money at all. It was about visibility, about refusing to be the soft place people land without ever looking down. I had not destroyed anything. I had redistributed reality. The world did not end. The family did not collapse. What collapsed was an arrangement built on my silence. And in the quiet that followed, something sturdier took its place. Not closeness, not forgiveness, but respect. Tentative, uncomfortable, real. At my age, that was more than enough. By the 13th day, life had found a new rhythm. Not loud, not celebratory, but steady. This was the part people never imagine when they picture cutting someone off. They expect drama to echo, guilt to linger, regret to sit heavy on the chest. What they don't expect is normalcy. The quiet return of mornings that belong only to you. I woke early and made oatmeal. I read the paper all the way through instead of skimming the parts that didn't concern anyone else. I noticed how often, in the past, I had rushed through my own hours as if they were a hallway others needed to pass through. The phone stayed mostly silent now. Elaine called once that week, short and factual. She told me Chloe had passed her midterms, that she was tired, that she was managing. The words sounded different coming from her mouth, less dismissive than before. That's good, I said. Managing builds muscle. Elaine did not argue. When we hung up, I realized something quietly unsettling. I no longer measured my days by their reactions. Their moods no longer set the weather inside my chest. I had not known how much space that habit took up until it was gone. One afternoon, I went through old photo albums. Not with nostalgia, but curiosity. I wanted to see when things had shifted. Not in them, but in me. I noticed how often I was standing slightly behind the camera, how many memories were framed around what I provided rather than who I was. I closed the album without sadness. Later that evening, Chloe sent a message I did not expect. I bought my first winter coat with my own money today. It's not fancy, but it's warm. I smiled at that. A real smile, the kind that comes without effort. Warm matters, I replied. You'll learn that faster than most. She sent a photo. Plain coat. Sensible color. No brand visible. It looked like something chosen for function, not approval. I recognized the instinct. That night, I thought about how often I'd been called practical, and how rarely anyone understood what that meant. Practical isn't small. It isn't joyless. It's survival refined into wisdom. The next morning, I ran into Ruth again at the mailbox. She looked at me over her glasses and said, "They still mad?" "I don't know," I replied. "I'm no longer checking." She nodded approvingly. "That's when it starts working." In the days that followed, invitations stopped being extended as bargaining chips. No more neutral ground dinners. No more suggestions framed as compromises. When Elaine mentioned holidays, it was tentative, not strategic. "We're thinking about Thanksgiving," she said one afternoon. "No pressure?" "No pressure," I agreed. That was new. That was earned. I spent time doing things I'd postponed for years. Small repairs, long walks. I started writing again. Not letters, not explanations, just thoughts, observations. The kind you don't need anyone to approve of. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the streetlights flicker on, I realized the strangest thing of all. I missed Chloe. Not the version that mocked me. Not the one who assumed permanence. But the child she had been before she learned to measure people by relevance. Missing someone doesn't mean returning to old patterns. It means holding space without reopening wounds. There is a difference. It takes age to learn it. Before bed, I opened my notebook one more time. I read every line I'd written so far. They didn't feel harsh. They felt accurate. I added one last sentence for the night. Distance is not the opposite of love. Disrespect is. I closed the notebook and placed it back in the drawer, no longer wondering if anyone would ever read it. Some truths are written only so you can live them. And I was. By the 14th day, the urgency had drained out of everything. Not disappeared. Drained. Like water leaving a flooded room, revealing the shape of the floor underneath. What remained was not damage, but truth. Uneven in places. Solid where it mattered. I noticed how my body moved differently now. I walked slower, but not from weakness. From attention. I no longer rushed through rooms as if someone were waiting for me to finish being myself. My hands lingered on small tasks. Folding a towel, watering a plant, turning a page. These were not delays. They were confirmations. Elaine called once that week, not to argue, not to persuade, to inform. Chloe had taken on extra hours. She was tired. Learning how much things cost when no one cushions the number. Elaine said it without accusation this time, almost with wonder. She doesn't complain much, Elaine said. Just figures it out. Yes, I replied. That's adulthood. There was a pause. Then, quietly, I didn't teach her that. No, I said. You didn't. She didn't push back. That silence told me more than any apology would have. Later that day, I found myself standing in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not inspecting flaws. I'd made peace with those years ago. But studying expression. There was a steadiness there I didn't remember seeing before. Less softness, perhaps, but also less fear. People think dignity is loud, that it arrives with speeches and slammed doors. It doesn't. It arrives when you stop shrinking your voice to keep rooms comfortable. In the afternoon, I walked to the park and sat on a bench. Children played nearby. A young woman argued into her phone, pacing. An older man fed birds with crumbs he'd clearly brought on purpose. Life, happening without my permission or participation. I thought about how often I had mistaken endurance for virtue. How many times I'd swallowed remarks because they didn't mean it. How often I'd paid, with money, with silence, with patience, to avoid being seen as difficult. Difficult to whom? That question felt important now. Chloe sent a message that evening. Short again, unadorned. I got my first paycheck. It's smaller than I expected. I smiled to myself. So was mine once, I replied. That's how it begins. She didn't answer right away. When she did, it was just, thank you. No demand attached. No expectation trailing behind it like a receipt. Just words, standing on their own. I realized then that whatever we might become to each other in the future, it would be something new. Not grandmother as sponsor. Not granddaughter as beneficiary. Two people related by blood, learning where respect fits between affection and distance. That felt possible. That night, I took out the old cardigan and folded it carefully. I placed it on the chair by the window, not because I planned to wear it the next day, but because it deserved a place of its own. Objects, like people, respond to how they are treated. As I prepared for bed, I thought about the word forgiveness. How often it is demanded from the wrong side of harm. How quickly people expect it to smooth over discomfort, as if forgiveness is the same as erasure. I had forgiven them in my own way. Not by returning to old roles, but by refusing to carry resentment forward. Forgiveness did not require me to resume my silence. It required me to stop poisoning myself with hope that had already failed. That was enough. Lying in the dark, I felt the quiet satisfaction of alignment. Not happiness, not pride, but something deeper. The sense that my actions finally matched my values. I was no longer teaching by giving. I was teaching by example. At my age, lessons are quieter, but they last longer. And whatever came next, reconciliation, distance, something in between, would happen on ground that no longer shifted beneath my feet. That, I knew, was the real inheritance. By the 15th day, nothing dramatic remained to be said, and that was how I knew the story had ended. Not with apologies lined up neatly, not with forgiveness wrapped in bows, but with life continuing, altered in ways that could not be reversed and did not need to be. It was a Sunday. Quiet. I woke later than usual and allowed myself to stay in bed for a few extra minutes, listening to the house breathe. No plans pressing in, no expectations waiting for my response. At 72, that felt like a luxury I had finally earned. I made coffee and sat by the window. Outside, autumn had begun to show itself in small, honest ways. A few leaves on the sidewalk. Cooler air, change without announcement. Elaine called mid-morning, not urgent, not tentative, just a call. "We're coming by next week," she said, "if that's okay." "With notice," I replied. "Yes." She hesitated, then added, "Chloe asked if she could come too." I considered that. Not long, just enough. "She can," I said, "if she comes as herself, not as a problem to be solved." Elaine understood that now. I could hear it in the way she exhaled. "She will," she said. "She's different." "Yes," I replied again. "She is." After the call, I didn't feel relief or tension, just acceptance. Whatever that visit brought, it would not undo what had already been learned. Some lines, once drawn, remain visible even when crossed with care. That afternoon, I went through my papers one last time. Not to change anything, just to see it all laid out. My life in documents, choices reduced to ink and signatures. I thought about that sentence people kept repeating, with one signature. They were right, but they were also wrong. That signature hadn't been an impulse. It had been the result of decades of being underestimated, of learning when silence protects peace, and when it only protects other people. The money had disappeared, yes, but what replaced it was something far more durable. Clarity. Chloe sent one final message that evening. "I don't expect anything from you, but I want you to know I don't laugh like that anymore." I read it slowly, carefully. Good, I wrote back. That means you're listening now. She replied with a simple heart. I did not read into it. I did not reject it either. Growth does not need grand gestures. It needs consistency. As the day faded into night, I sat with my notebook open on my lap. I reread every line I had written over these weeks. They were not angry words. They were precise ones. I did not add anything else. Some lessons do not need summaries. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror one last time. The same woman stared back at me. Older, lined, undeniably real. But there was no apology in her eyes anymore. No quiet plea to be tolerated. Just presence. I had not ruined my family. I had corrected my place within it. I had not taken something away. I had stopped giving it to those who mistook access for entitlement. And in doing so, I had given my granddaughter something no fund ever could. A reason to grow up. At my age, you stop confusing love with endurance. You stop mistaking generosity for obligation. You learn that respect, once lost, is not begged for. It is required. That was my quiet victory. No shouting, no revenge, no regret. Just a pen, a name, and the courage to finally mean it. If this story felt familiar, if you've ever been dismissed, mocked, or quietly used, stay. Read more, and don't forget to leave a comment.
H1. Commentary on My Granddaughter Mocked My Clothes. The next day, her college fund disappeared with one signature. Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Alright, we got a story today, and this title is spicy. My granddaughter mocked my clothes. The next day, her college fund disappeared with one signature. Oh snap. Grandma said, "You want to disrespect me? Watch what happens to that money I've been saving for you." This is about to be a lesson in consequences, respect, and not biting the hand that feeds you. I already know this is gonna have me in my feelings, because disrespecting elders, that's a big no in my book. Let me get comfortable, because this is about to be good. Let's dive in. Pause. Settling in with serious expression. Alright, video is starting. Story format. Text on screen. This looks like it's gonna be detailed, and I'm here for all of it. Let me read along and react as this unfolds. Here we go. Okay, so our narrator is a grandmother. We'll call her Mrs. Dorothy. She's 68 years old, worked as a teacher for 40 years before retiring. She's describing herself as practical, frugal, someone who values substance over appearance. She doesn't wear designer clothes or keep up with trends. She wears comfortable, clean, modest clothing that serves its purpose. So we're establishing that Grandma is sensible, not flashy, prioritizes function over fashion. Nothing wrong with that. That's her choice. Mrs. Dorothy talks about her granddaughter. We'll call her Madison, 17 years old, high school senior. And Mrs. Dorothy says Madison has always been materialistic. Obsessed with brands, with image, with status. Always wanting the newest phone, the trendiest clothes, designer, everything. Oh boy, we got an entitled teenager who values things over people. I can already see where this is heading. Mrs. Dorothy explains that she's been saving for Madison's college fund since the day she was born. For 17 years, she's been putting money away, sacrificing, saving, investing, and it's grown to a substantial amount, enough to cover 4 years at a good university, with money left over. So for nearly 2 decades, Grandma has been planning for Madison's future. Making sure she has opportunities. That's love. That's sacrifice. Madison knows about this college fund, has known for years. And Mrs. Dorothy says Madison has always kind of expected it, like it's a given. Like Grandma owe it to her? Never expressing real gratitude, just assuming it'll be there. Mrs. Dorothy tried to teach Madison about money management, about gratitude, about values beyond material things. But Madison's parents, Mrs. Dorothy's son and daughter-in-law, they've always spoiled her, given her everything she wanted. Never taught her the value of earning things or being grateful. So we got parents who aren't parenting properly, and a teenager who's learned that she can have whatever she wants without appreciating it. Recipe for disaster. Now we're getting to the incident. The moment that changed everything. Mrs. Dorothy was invited to Madison's school event. It was a college fair where students and parents could explore university options. Madison specifically asked Grandma to come because it's about my college future. And Mrs. Dorothy thought, oh, she wants me there to discuss the college fund, to plan together. How sweet. So Mrs. Dorothy gets dressed. She puts on clean slacks, a nice blouse, comfortable shoes. Nothing fancy, but presentable and appropriate. She's 68 years old, retired, going to a school event. She looks fine. She arrives at the school and finds Madison, and immediately she notices Madison's face change. Madison looks at her grandmother up and down, and her expression is disgusted, getting tense. Madison whispers, "Grandma, what are you wearing?" Mrs. Dorothy is confused. "What do you mean? I'm dressed appropriately for a school event." And Madison, loud enough for her friends to hear, says, "You look like you got dressed at a thrift store. Those pants are so outdated. That blouse is from like the 1990s. You couldn't put in any effort to look decent." Standing up. "Excuse me? This child just publicly disrespected her grandmother's appearance? The grandmother who's been saving for her future for 17 years? Mrs. Dorothy is stunned. She's hurt, but she tries to keep her composure. "Madison, that's very rude. I'm dressed just fine." But Madison's on a roll now. In front of her friends, she says, "God, it's so embarrassing. My friend's grandparents look normal. Why do I have to have the grandma who dresses like she shops at Goodwill?" The public humiliation, the disrespect, and the irony of using shops at Goodwill as an insult when Grandma is the one who's been saving money for Madison instead of spending it on designer clothes. Madison's friends are uncomfortable. Some of them are trying to pull Madison away like, "Come on, let's go look at the college booths." But Madison keeps going. "Maybe if you cared about how you look, you'd understand why appearance matters. But you're just old and out of touch." Old and out of touch? This woman taught for 40 years. She raised your parent. She's been funding your future. And you're calling her out of touch? Mrs. Dorothy, with all the dignity she can muster, says quietly, "I see. Thank you for making your feelings clear, Madison." Period. And she leaves. She walks out of that school with her head held high, but inside, she's devastated. Getting emotional. Can you imagine? You spend 17 years saving for someone. You show up to support them, and they publicly mock you? For clothes? Not even your character or your actions. Your clothes? Mrs. Dorothy gets home and she cries. She's hurt, she's disappointed, she's questioning everything. She thought she had a good relationship with Madison. She thought Madison was better than this. But then, the hurt turns to clarity. Sitting down, she realizes Madison doesn't value her. Madison doesn't respect her. Madison sees her as an ATM, not as a person. And if Madison can't show basic respect, basic human decency, why should Mrs. Dorothy fund her future? The college fund, was a gift, not an obligation, not a requirement. A gift based on love and hope for Madison's future. But gifts can be rescinded when the recipient shows they don't deserve them. So Mrs. Dorothy makes a decision. That night she calls her financial advisor. She's making a change to the college fund. The next day, Mrs. Dorothy calls a family meeting. Madison, her parents, everyone together. Madison shows up rolling her eyes, probably expecting Grandma to apologize for embarrassing her. Mrs. Dorothy sits everyone down and says, "I need to talk to you all about Madison's college fund." Madison perks up. "Oh good. Are we picking which school to send the money to? I'm thinking about this private university that costs $60,000 a year. But don't worry, we have the fund." Peace. Last.